I am very excited to welcome back to the show someone we haven't spoken to in some time, a candidate running for Senate in Ohio, Morgan Harper. Welcome back to the Damage Report.
Thanks for having me, John. Good to be here.
It's good to have you here. The last we spoke, we checked, it was January 29th, 2020.
Wow.
So right on the cusp of the pandemic. A lot has happened since then. One of the more important things, of course, is you announcing your run. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'm running for the open U.S. Senate seat in Ohio. It's a big opportunity. You know, these open seats don't come around very often, and we haven't had a great track record of winning as Democratic candidates in the state of Ohio statewide. And so I think there's some pretty clear reasons why we do not have a lot of voters who want traditional politicians or politics. And so our campaign and my candidacy is offering an alternative that we think is going to put us in the best position to flip this seat and get to the U.S. Senate.
Okay, so as you say, it's an open race. It's being vacated by Rob Portman. So I was wondering, in these sorts of situations, coming out of the incumbent stepping down, do you have a vibe for how popular Rob Portman was, what people thought about his legacy, and how that might inform their decision to replace him with another Republican or move in a very different direction?
Well, what Rob Portman represents is, like a lot of other, if you want to call it establishment Republicans, they're just opting out of the mess that they've created. And it's a mess that has been created by a lot of corporate politicians. And instead of trying to fight for the future of our country that will serve the people, they are just going to go continue to be rich in retirement. And so, what we can learn from that is that the voters, like I mentioned before, are rejecting this, especially people in Ohio. There's a real populist sentiment afoot, and folks realize we have been completely screwed. The economic system is rigged, and we want people that are actually going to stand up and fight for us. The far right has been exploiting that, but what we are presenting is an alternative that is going to acknowledge that truth, but then also present an alternative that will actually try to implement policies that are going to benefit people. That's what Democrats haven't been able to do in our state, and that's what a corporate politician will never be able to do.
Okay, and we will certainly talk about some of the other potential Democrats who might be running in this. But so this is your second run for Congress. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the lessons that you're taking from your first run, how that's informing this run for Senate?
So our first campaign, I ran for a congressional seat in Central Ohio as a grassroots candidate. And, one of the biggest learnings from that run where, when we launched, people said, this chick's going nowhere. She's going to get 2% of the vote. It was a reflection of just how disconnected the political class had become from real people. Real people are fed up. And so we were able, despite COVID, the pandemic, switching to an all mail-in election, to really build a strong coalition of over 20,000 voters that were saying, we want something different. We don't want money in politics. We want leaders that are actually going to fight for us. And so it was through that coalition that it really gave us the information to know, hey, we can put together a coalition statewide. This is the mix of people you need to be successful statewide. And that's why we ultimately decided to get in the race.
So I'm curious what you think about some of the likely competition in the Democratic primary. So we won't yet know for a while, what'll end up happening with the general election. But Tim Ryan, at least, ran for president last time around, is going to be running. What do you make of that? And of course, integrating your experience with how the Democratic establishment tends to get involved in these sorts of races. What do you think about the primary side of this election?
Well, the primary is our first big hurdle, and it is a big one because, we are presenting a whole different type of campaign and candidacy for a statewide Democratic candidate. But the reason why I decided to get in is because based on what we know in Ohio politics, Tim Ryan won't win. Right? I mean, like I was saying, there's this rejection of traditional politicians, somebody who has built a career in Washington, 20 years, that has overseen the economic destruction of our state, is just not going to get any traction with voters. We have to have an alternative that people can believe in. And, my background, having worked at the CFPB, going after big banks after the financial crisis, standing up to big tech over the past year and a half that is spreading misinformation, profiting off of our data, that's how people know that we are real, that I really do want to fight for them, that I really am going to Washington, not to build a career, but actually to get things done. That's the only hope we have of getting any traction with voters at this point. And it's just not something that my opponent in the Democratic primary is ever going to authentically be able to do. He's flip-flopped. Can't trust it.
I'm curious what you think about no candidate gets to like choose what the political environment they'll be running in is, but you'll be running in 2022. So I'm looking at what the Democratic Party nationally is doing and not doing with the majorities that they've been given. And by the time your race, assuming you win the primary and you move on the general election, we're going to be in the thick of potentially a backlash to Democratic inaction. So is that something that you're worried about? Is it something that you're integrating into the way you're campaigning, that it might not be a situation in which being closely affiliated with the National Democratic Party might not be a big boost?
Well, the reality is we have already been in that situation in Ohio. Joe Biden didn't win Ohio. So there has already been a real rejection of the Democratic brand in our state. And so the only way that we're going to be able to overcome that and have people buy into a Democrat is by being a different kind of Democrat. That is one of the biggest questions, the most common questions I get when I'm traveling around the state is, what makes you a different kind of Democrat? Because Democrats have shipped our jobs overseas, Democrats don't know how to manage our cities, and Democrats just build their careers. They don't care about us. Rightly or wrongly, that's where people are at. And so we need to be able to say, hey, yeah, I'm no darling here of any political establishment. I'm only in this because I'm with you. I'm sick of it and I'm ready for something different. And that's what I'm offering to you.
I'm curious what you make of the way that American politics and political rhetoric have shifted during your time, from your first run. We now have, you're running in Senate. We had senators trying to overturn the results of the election earlier this year. We have women of color being targeted by the right in anime parodies of their murder, lies being told about them being terrorists. Like, this seems to be one of the big ways they're invigorating their base, is choosing a woman of color on the Democratic side and making her into the biggest villain in the country. What do you think about this course that America seems to be on?
Yeah, it's a scary place that we find ourselves in. And Ohio in this Senate race is very reflective of that dynamic. I mean, the people running on the Republican side of the ticket, J.D. Vance, Josh Mandel, they are all about stoking that type of sentiment and willing to divide people for their own political gain. But I'm going to come back to the main point, though, in Ohio is that people are lumping all of these politicians together. And so we need to be able to have someone, and that is the conversation that I have with people all the time is, yeah, I'm different. I'm different in a lot of ways. I'm different in policy. I'm different in style. I'm different in that nobody's chosen me to be the one. And that's a sentiment that I think a lot of people in Ohio identify with, because look at where our state has been. I mean, we had in 2020 for the first time that our death rate exceeded the birth rate. Some of that's COVID, but a lot of that is other stuff going on. And if we're going to figure out how to be a state where people actually do feel like they can live, build families, be protected, we've got to have major shifts happen very quickly so that these people don't continue to build power.
Yeah. So if someone is watching and they want to get involved in your campaign, still relatively early on in the process, there's a lot
sort of early.
It's sort of, well, American politics is always in the election cycle, but what can people do to potentially help out?
Our website's morganharper.org. You can sign up there to donate, volunteer, also follow along social media, MH4OH, Morgan Harper for Ohio. DM me, you have ideas. I mean, this is a true grassroots effort. I know that TYT Network is strong, and we've always counted on it for support in order to continue to build and change the political dynamic in Ohio and by extension, our whole country. And that's what we're trying to do.
Awesome. Well, Morgan Harper, it's always good to talk to you, and best of luck, because while we don't know who the Republican running will be, they are troglodytes. They are just an awful pack of ghouls. So best of luck to you in trying to ward them off.
Really appreciate it, John. Thank you.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.